This book grew up around one idea, one moment of dialogue came to me one day in the car, and the whole book, the story is a comic and his relationship with his grandfather, who is an ex-vaudevillian. And I made the grandfather the repository of all the information that I wish anyone had shared with me when I went into stand-up comedy. But it all grew up around this one moment when the kid is visiting his grandfather in a hospital. He's 17, the kid, not the grandfather. And he's pretty sure Papa's gonna die. And he wants his approval, and he says, Papa, I'm thinking of showcasing at Catch a Rising Star. And Papa says, so showcase it. And he says, but what if it doesn't go well? And Papa says, what if it doesn't go well? It's one of thousands of performances, hundreds of thousands of performances in a lifetime. And the kid's trying to wrap his mind around hundreds of thousands of performances. And he says, you think I'm ready? And Papa says, you're a funny boy, Damon. And Damon rankles at this. And he says, I'm a man, Papa. And Papa says, you're not that funny. And in that moment, a whole relationship was revealed to me. And that thing happened where there are cascading epiphanies. And by the time I got home on that drive, I had a book to write. And now, hotel, Hollwyood, New York editor, legacy publishing house waiting for me in the bar. I got a ticket from the valet guy. I walked in. I decided I was going to order coffee. Ordinarily at a bar, I might order scotch, but I wanted to be fully present for this meeting. If he offered me more than I was expecting, I wanted to hide my shock. If he offered me less, I didn't want to look disappointed. I went into the meeting, sat down with him. We made a little bit of small talk. He told me that he had liked my work before he read the book, that he had heard me on the radio, and I heard myself saying, oh, did you hear me on NPR or on WBAI? And then I immediately hated myself, because there's an old joke that comics tell one another that most of you have probably never heard. And a comic does his 2 nights at a club in Vegas and then goes up to his hotel room and finds a woman in a negligee on his bed. And she says, I owe you a debt of gratitude. 10 years ago, my husband was killed in a car crash. My son was left in a coma. I watched him wither away over the next 6 years. The moment he died, I got the news that my mother had Alzheimer's. I went with my dad to take care of her as she slowly forgot our names and then our faces. And then she aspirated oatmeal and died. And then my father got cancer and he took 1.5 years to die. I have not laughed in 10 years. Tonight, you brought laughter back into my life. And I want to thank you for that. And the comic says, wow. Did you see the first show or the second show? And I didn't want to be that guy, and I was saying, did you? It turned out they had heard me on XM Sirius, and they brought my coffee, and he was drinking bourbon, and it was small talk, and I wanted to get down to business, but I didn't want to look anxious, because you don't want to look anxious, you don't want to look desperate, so I was being very patient. And he told me about the publishing industry and how it's not what it used to be, and how they used to just champion books that they loved, and boy, he wished he could buy my book. And I wanted to scream at him, well, I sent it to you because you are an editor at a publishing company. You can buy my book. But I didn't say that. I just listened while he complained about the state of the business. And then he said, you remember a couple of years ago when Snooki got her big book deal? And then I wished that I had ordered the scotch, because I didn't want to be fully present for any Snooki-related discussion of literature. And he said, yeah, she got that deal because she was already a celebrity. She had over 500,000 Twitter followers. She had more than 1 million fans on her Facebook page. I did my due diligence, Brody. I read your book. I sat down, I read it in one sitting. I laughed and I cried and it was beautiful. And then I looked you up. You got what, 10,000 Twitter followers? 2,000 on Facebook? That's not enough to guarantee an ROI. And then I spent a little while trying to remember what ROI stood for, because return on investment is not something I'm thinking about when I'm writing a brilliant book. And then he explained that he was very glad that I'd come down to meet him because he's pretty sure the future is in the internet, and he wondered if there were any comedy channels on the internet where I had any connections where I could set him up with a meeting. So I gave him some names and some phone numbers because that doesn't cost me anything, and I got into my car to head home. Well, first I had to get validation. That's the cruelest trick Hollywood plays on artists, isn't it? You go into a little conference room or an office and you tear open the gaping wound of your wit and you pull out some glistening gems and you scatter them on the table trying to show the utmost confidence, and then they say no, or they say, go home and wait for us to say no. And then you have to go out to a receptionist or an assistant and voice the subtext you have been hiding since your arrival and say, I need validation. Can you validate me, please?